Okay, you guys, so welcome back for part 2 of this Introduction to the Health and Social Care Year 2 coursework. Now, obviously, hopefully you've already watched part 1. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, I'd say go back, watch that, because that provides the overview of what we're doing. And as you can see by the sort of tabs across the top, we are moving now into what is sociology. So we are going to look at what are the key concepts, the terminology used within sociology. Now, as you can see just by these two little icons at the bottom here, these will pop up throughout the presentation, giving an indication of where material is going to be based and where you can find additional resources. So using page 2 to 14 of the textbook will provide you this information. Also, don't forget you've got the Padlets, which I mentioned in the previous video. And also you can contact your teachers. There's Moodle. There's a whole range of resources to help with this. If you see this icon on the right, it is a suggestion that some of the materials will reflect and link back to what we've been doing this year. So it will reflect back to your coursework or materials from the exam unit. So these will pop up periodically, just to remind you that some of this stuff reflects on what we've done previously. So let's get started. So to get you thinking, first of all, sociologists claim that the groups we belong to, for example, our family, our friends, influence how we behave. In the space in your booklets, there is a spider diagram. I think it's towards the bottom of page 1, or on the front page, to think about all the groups you belong to. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to think about all the groups you belong to and then choose 2 of those groups and think about how it has affected your development. So this is a reflection and is throwing back to the pies. So obviously pies are always going to be key. So don't forget our pies. So that's what this is reflecting on. So what I'd like to do is say, pause the video, take a couple of minutes, have a go at this task, think about the groups that affect you and how you develop. And I'm just going to give you some time to do that. So pop the video on pause and I'll be back soon. Ta-da, I'm back. Right, okay, so obviously think about all the groups you belong to. Hopefully you've had a thought about some of them. So you know, friends, family, peer groups. There's a whole range of groups we belong to. Obviously you're part of education, although not currently because of Corona. You've got employment, you have got, you know, local charities and groups you might all belong to. And again, all of these will have a big influence on your behaviour. Thinking about our pies, they will help our physical development, intellectual, emotional, social. So for example, school and peer groups might provide you with emotional support and help with your resilience. They might help with your social development skills and your sense of self and your self-esteem. They can make you feel included and valued. They might help you develop new skills, which improves your intellectual development. But peer pressure and peer groups could lead to some negative behaviour, drinking, smoking, which has an impact on physical health. You know, the relationships can sometimes be problematic, and that can lead to negative self-esteem, self-image, emotional resilience. You know, distractions from school can affect your intellectual achievement and intellectual skill. So it's important to think about the groups you've chosen, think about how they have affected your development, how they improved or how they maybe set back your development. Now, in the coursework unit, you will be studying the different approaches that sociologists have used to explain health and social care issues. And you'll need to consider the definitions of health and illness and examine the impact of the family, occupation, social class and other aspects of our environment and culture on our health and well-being. Now that's a big mouthful, and I realise some of you are sort of thinking, what is that about? So if I just try and explain that. So what is sociology? So sociology is concerned with the study of human beings. It's like you think about the name, it's theology, it's a study of society. And it's really looking at how society works, how people behave, how groups interact with one another. Now, part of sociology, if you maybe frame it in context of other subjects you've done, psychology is very much about how we behave as a result of internal processes within the mind. Biology, again, I suppose in some ways, is how our body functions, how we work, how we behave because of biological, genetic structures. And sociology is all about our behaviour, how we act based on where we live and the world around us. So we study how groups relate to one another, how they influence behaviours. Now, sociologists dive into lots of areas of social life that we assume are natural, normal, and inevitable. So the way we behave. So one of the big things that sociologists highlight is that our behaviour in a sort of a Western European country like England or Britain is that the way we behave, we assume it's normal and natural, and that's kind of just the way things are because of our culture and the way we've been raised and what we've learned. We've learned a particular way of behaving. So when we see videos of people eating particular types of food with their hands, or because it's kind of a hot topic like the wet markets and eating certain types of animals, we see that as wrong and disgusting and bizarre. Part of that's because culturally that's not been our socialisation. We have not been raised in that way. That's different to what we think. So sociologists are interested in studying groups. They look at institutions in society, so organisations or systems like education. They look at what we call social processes and ways we learn. So just highlight some of the things. So groups is going to be key. We're going to look at institutions. We're going to look at processes and how all of these affect human behaviour. And just as a little pet peeve, we've got an S instead of a Z in socialisation. We're not going to use the American spelling. So this is obviously what sociology is. Now, the easiest way I like to explain it, if we move on, is I've got a system in a second, but just to flag it up before we move too far ahead, is in your pack there is a gap fill task, and what I would say is pause the video and make a note of some of these gaps and put them into your pack so you've completed the gap fill. So when I try to explain sociology, the best way I like to do this is by thinking about The Simpsons and using The Simpsons to do this. Now, if you think about The Simpsons and Springfield as a society, or as an example of society, it contains a big mixture of different people, as you can see. And within all these different people, you've got different social groups, different peer groups. You've got different kins and family groups. You've got different social classes, so working class, middle class, upper class. You've got rich and poor and levels of wealth difference. You've got different genders and sexualities. Now, again, gender identity and sexuality, two different things. But again, we have quite a range of different groups. You've got different ethnicities, religions and cultures, different political views. You've got people in different occupations and different professions and jobs. Levels of education differ, different age ranges, different nationalities, disabilities and needs, and last but not least, different values and ideas and beliefs. So not beliefs in the sense of religion, but beliefs about what people think are important, what they value, what they do. And this is why I think Simpsons is a good example of trying to explain what society is, because our society is exactly like this. It's a big mixture of different people, different thoughts, all interacting with one another. And that's what sociology is interested in. How do these groups interact together? Now, one big argument within sociology, and one that we've already touched on in health and social care, is this nature versus nurture debate. And again, if you think back to B1 for the exam unit, for genetics and nature and nurture, we've already discussed this topic. Now, we know that the idea of nature is that our genetics, our biology, determines factors like our health and life expectancy, and in some cases our behaviour. Nurture is more about the way that we raise, our lifestyle, our decisions, our choices. These shape who we are and our life experiences. And in sociology, this is a big debate about whether we are a product of nature and nurture. Now, you can take a guess. If you think, what do you think sociologists would say? Now, sociology is very much all about nurture. We are a product of the way we were raised, the environment we live in, our parents, our culture. So this is what shapes us. This is what makes us who we are. Topics like biology, psychology are very much in favour of nature. So we are genetically designed in a particular way. Health and social care does kind of fit somewhere in the middle. It's kind of it's a bit of nature, it's a bit of nurture. It kind of looks at a bit of both. So health and social care is kind of the kind of middle ground topic, but for sociology, it is all about nurture. So just to kind of explain the difference between the two, let's clear some of these drawings. So nurture is all about the environment, as this key word that I mentioned earlier, socialization, how we are socialized. And I'm going to explain what socialization is in a second. Our culture, so again, it's where we live, it's when we live. So society 50 years ago was very different to society today. So the culture will have shifted. This idea of fluid is an odd concept, but if you imagine water, just based on my amazing drawing here, think about fluidity of water. Now, if you put water in a plastic bottle or in a bottle and you move the bottle around, the water will just shape and mould and adapt to the shape of the plastic around it. And nurture argument is a bit like that. We adapt and we amend and we change our behaviour based on society around us. I think that not as great because it's not a situation, but the current lockdown, the current social distancing, because of external influences, we have had to change our working habits, our social habits, our shopping habits, our day-to-day lives have all been changed. Your education has changed, and we're having to adapt to that. And that's a good example of this fluidity that we're talking about. And lastly, socially learnt. So we learn to be part of society through the process of socialisation. We learn from our parents how to be part of society, and this is what sociology believes. The nature argument, as we said before, which was biology, which was psychology, a little bit of health in here, but suggests that our behaviour is innate, it's biological, it's within us, it's fixed, it's predetermined. Sociology disagrees with that. So, if you think about behaviours around the world and how they vary, now, as I say, this link will be in the physical PowerPoint, not the video. But you can take a look at the video and you can maybe pick a couple of examples of how behaviour happens and changes across the world. And I suspect this is probably a HSBC video advert, so it shows you about cultural differences. So I'd say look at those and take some examples, or do a little bit of internet research. Look at your own, how life is different in India, or how people live day to day in Korea. Look at lifestyle differences and life differences, and add some of those into your pack as just examples of the variations of cultures around the world. So, little discussion point, and I'll put these up and give you a chance to think. Are these things natural or learned? So, have a think, have a chat with your parents or people around you, or just have a think on your own. So, I'm just going to pop these up on the screen and pause the video and take a think. Okay, so let's have a quick look at these. So women's maternal instinct, is it natural or is it learned? Now, when I've had discussions about these topics with my classes in the past, we kind of find it's a little bit of both. So women's maternal instinct, if we go N for natural and then L for learned, so we go with the N and the L. So women's maternal instinct, a lot of arguments say it's natural. Women biologically have children. There are hormones which create maternal feelings. So when babies are born, oxytocin is released, and that's like a kind of hormone that kind of is almost like called the love drug. It tricks the body into feelings of love, and these could create maternal instincts. But on the flip side, we could think about learned behaviour. So, of girls, how many of you had like a baby doll or a little doll in a pram, and you would have learned the nurturing, the caring behaviours? Boys being more aggressive than girls, again, we've got arguments that it's natural, boys have testosterone or more testosterone in bodies. This is linked with aggression, and it could be that boys are encouraged become more aggressive because of those hormonal differences. But it's also learned. Boys are encouraged to be more aggressive, more risk-taking, more physical, more active than girls. So it could be aggression as learned behaviour, and particularly in later adulthood with like stuff like toxic masculinity and machoism. This is a learned behaviour. Now the third one, girls being more concerned with their appearance than boys. Now again, probably it's a learned behaviour. I don't really think there's any natural merit to girls being more concerned with appearance. And actually, as society progresses, I think boys are becoming equally concerned about their appearance than girls. So the media is having a big influence, and sort of the anecdotal example I've got is that a boy in my tute group a couple of years ago would bring a little mini pair of straighteners in his bag every day during tutorial. He'd plug in his little straighteners and tidy up his little Bieber fringe during tutorial. So I think boys are becoming more concerned about appearance. Now intelligence, naturally there are arguments that, you know, people can be naturally intelligent. You've got conditions like eidetic memories, but intelligence is learned. You learn your intelligence, and it's more about your attitudes to education and learning, which I think is probably key. And that's again something you'll learn from your parents. And lastly, old people retiring from work. Now we might think it's natural that old people retire from work when they get old, but it's not. It is a learned process. We learn to let older people retire. In the past, once you stopped working, you couldn't earn any money, your family would either look after you, or if you didn't have anyone to look after you, you died. So that was kind of it. So to provide care for older people, that's a learned process, and it changes. So the pension age, retirement age has gone up recently. And again, that reflects that this is something that's socially made. It isn't a normal, natural process. It's something that's designed by society. And then we have our key sociological concepts. So the key concepts are in the textbook on page 4 to 5. Some of the next few slides obviously have some of the definitions, but I would say use your textbook to fill in the key concepts. Now, these definitions will be important to include in your coursework, to mention these as part of P1. So make sure you've got your definitions in there. So socialization, we'll quickly go through some of these. Now, socialization is the process of learning to be part of society. The socialization process is a key idea, and actually it's where part of the name sociology comes from, socialization. So you are learning to be part of society. Now, as an individual, as when we're born, we are, like this little image, a blank slate. There's nothing there. And now, as we go through our life, through primary socialization, which is within the family, and then later through secondary socialization within education, we learn norms and values. So we learn what is normal behaviour, what is acceptable behaviour, and values are the rules, what is right and wrong. We also learn culture, and culture is the society around us, the world around us, our style of dress, music, food, and language. This is all part of culture. And through socialization, all of this stuff is being transmitted to us. We're learning this from our parents, from our family, from our friends, through the media, through religion. This is all helping us to become part of society, to become socialized. And imagine like a little blank slate of a person. As you go through socialization, you're building up the information and you're becoming part of society. And this is very much why sociology is part of the nurture argument, that to learn how to be part of society requires this socialization process. You will need to be taught this information. Other key terms we've got are social institutions. Now, these are the key institutions, what we call the major building blocks of society. This would be stuff like family, education, religion, legal systems, social services, government, banking networks and economies. These are the big institutions. These are the big systems and networks which we need to have, that society needs to survive. Based again on current climates, think about the key workers, nurses, police, firefighters, shop workers. These are the key institutions that we need for society to work. And you think, even in the current state of lockdown, shops are still open, police are still working, hospitals are still there, ambulances, fire engines. All these services are still going because they are essential institutions. We need them for society to function. We've then got norms and values. So norms, as I mentioned earlier, the socially expected rules. So it's accepted you knock on a door before you enter it. That's a normal behaviour. Now, the value associated with that, the belief about what's right and wrong, is that knocking on the door is essential for respecting privacy. So norms and values tend to influence one another. And then last but not least, you've got this extra activity. So on page 6 of the textbook, there is a task which is a stretch and challenge. So this is an optional extra, but obviously feel free to have a look at this and think about obviously life for children growing up in the traveller community. Think about how their norms and values are different from yours. Okay, so that brings us to the end of part 2 of this topic. So as I say, we'll finish up here. Go back through, rewatch this, fill in your pack, use your textbook. If you're not sure, email teachers. But as I say, this is the kind of wrapping up for part 2, and obviously I look forward to seeing you all in part 3.